Welcome to the Build on Beauty podcast, where beauty is born skin deep. Now, here's your host, author, speaker, entrepreneur, Cornell Jermaine.
Hello, and welcome back to the Build on Beauty podcast. I am your host, Cornell Jermaine. I'm so happy that you were able to tune in with me today. If you are a regular listener, thank you for joining with me once again. And if you are new to the show, welcome, welcome, welcome. Listen, today I want to talk about how to find opportunity in every situation. 3 questions you must ask yourself. Now, I want to start by saying I'm going to take my time a little bit with this one, and only because I really want to make sure that each concept, each thought is fully flushed out so you really walk away understanding what I'm talking about. I'm going to reference some biblical text in this episode. So for those who may take issue with the Christian faith or with biblical principles, I'm letting you know where we're going and what's going to be the foundation for our conversation today. But if you're a regular and you're used to my programming, my show, my content, you already know that this is the root of most of the content that we produce. So it's who I am, it's what I do, and you probably won't have an issue with that. I trust and believe that. So let's get into it. First scripture I want to cite is Proverbs 18 and the 15th verse. Now remember, we're talking about how to find opportunity in every situation. So Proverbs 18 and 15, the first clause of that verse says, "The heart of the prudent getteth knowledge." The heart of the prudent getteth knowledge. So let's take that text real quick and just kind of break it down a little bit so we can get some understanding and revelation on what the scripture is saying. Prudent comes from a Hebrew word meaning to separate or distinguish mentally. Let me say that again. The scripture says the heart of the prudent getteth knowledge. Prudent is a Hebrew word that means to separate or distinguish mentally. Now, when you distinguish something, it means to recognize or treat differently. So I'm going to recognize and treat something differently mentally is what it means to be prudent. So if you're a prudent person, you approach situations with a different mental perspective than the average person. What do I mean? If somebody stumps your toe, whether on purpose or accidental, if you're a person that's not prudent, you're probably going to be ready to shove them and push them away from you and maybe retaliate. If you're a person of prudence, you're going to probably figure out, well, what happened? Maybe they were tripping. Maybe they were lost their steps. And then that caused them to step on my toe. You approach things in a different way. You mentally distinguish circumstances that should result in one action or one response, and you respond in the opposite or in a different way. So when we talk about how to find opportunity in every situation, we're talking about 3 questions that we must ask ourselves. To find opportunity in a situation based on Proverbs 18 and 15, the heart of the prudent getteth knowledge, we have to ask ourselves in every situation, and I'm talking about particularly situations that typically don't deem themselves an opportunity for such things. If somebody wants to fight you, we'll just take maybe after school, when you were in school back in the day, and somebody said they want to fight you 3:00 on the parking lot, you're obviously not going to look at that situation as an opportunity to obtain knowledge. You're going to look at that either as an opportunity to use your aggression to retaliate or fight back, or to use your fear to flight and run. In using these questions to find opportunity, I'm talking about using them in situations that you typically don't deem itself proper for such use. So what do I mean? The first question that we have to ask ourselves in order to find opportunity in every situation is, what did I learn? What did this situation teach me? What can I learn from this situation? What lesson can I take away from this circumstance? All of those questions support that. What did I learn? What knowledge? Remember, the heart of the prudent getteth knowledge. So if you're prudent and your desire is to look at situations in a different way through a different lens and distinguish what they typically are supposed to mean from what you want to walk away with, you can look at that situation with a prudent eye and take a lesson, even though it does not look like there's a teachable moment there. Let me use an example real quick, because I want to make sure I break this down and give you the scriptural reference, but also give you some practical examples as well. When I was in college, I had, now mind you, I went to a very small college, only a handful of Black people. When I got there, I realized that the Blacks, we were an anomaly at this school. You know what I mean? I didn't know that going in, but it was okay with me. I didn't mind. I didn't care. I had been in those kind of environments before. It wasn't a big deal to me. But what happens, I learned, is that because there was such a small group of Blacks at the school, the Blacks that were there, you found that it was cliquish. You know, everybody had a group. Everybody had a sector of people that they gathered with because there was such a small amount of them. Most of them were gathering around with the sports type of individuals, the premier sports athletes. And my roommate, whom I love, was one of the, if not the, actually, he was the premier basketball player on the team, freshman just like I, but he was drafted from a high school where he did well and was the premier player on the team. Well, quite naturally, he attracted people. So there was a clique that was all around him. Well, between him and I, we had a great friendship and great time living together in the dorm. And we began to form a group of ourselves, or people just, we didn't form it. They just kind of were attracted to us. You know what I mean? It was just, you know, people that obviously, you know, a couple of them, you know, were fond of him because of his status on the team and all that stuff. And then we just all, you know, enjoyed being around each other. Well, this group formed kind of organically, and it just became the group that we just hung with all the time. Well, one particular individual in the group, because obviously I was the only non-athletic person in the group, but it didn't matter to any of the athletes. We were all cool. We all found common interests. We loved one another. We kicked it, all that kind of stuff. But there was one individual who tried to always make distinctions and tried to always find opportunities to pick on me and pit my roommate and I against each other. Well, it didn't work, but the persistence was still there. Well, one day I had reached my peak in this behavior, and it showed in my response. Color in the lines and fill in the blanks for yourself, but it was not a great situation. And I walked away from that situation. Now, mind you, these were people that I enjoyed, you know, and for a long time, I put up with the behavior just because I said, okay, it's cool, whatever, you know, and I gave, you know, I kind of slapped back a little bit, or clapped back, as they say, a little bit, you know, and I gave my, you know, responses. I wasn't just, you know, getting beat up on it, or, you know, punched around and all, none of that. But it began to wear on me because I'm like, okay, now you just, it's just becoming a little bit too much, you know what I mean? And one day I just blew a gasket. Well, after that point, I was done. My roommate, we cool. With the other people, you know, that I was in the group, we cool. But, you know, with this particular individual, oh, I'm good. And if we're gathering and this individual is going to be there, I'm straight. I'm good. You know what I mean? Y'all go have fun. Tell me about it. And we'll get together, you know, on the sidebar. But as it pertains to this person, I'm good on them. That was my position. And I was good. Seriously, I didn't have no ill feelings or anything like that. Well, one day I was in the basement of our dormitory watching TV, and my roommate came down and he said, hey, somebody upstairs for you in our dorm. And I'm like, well, who's upstairs? You know, I was like, okay, you know, I got up, you know, went up the steps, went to the dorm, and it was this particular person that I had the issue with. Now, mind you, this weeks had passed since I crossed this person's path. Well, unbeknownst to me, the person had been wanting to reconnect with me, but didn't know how. They thought I was mad and didn't want to, you know, kind of push my button again. So they kind of just stayed out of my way. But they had been telling my roommate that, you know, well, I miss him. You know, I ain't mean it like that. You know what I mean? You know, whatever the case may be. So my roommate took it upon himself. He was like, I'll fix this. You know, I'll fix it. You know what I mean? Now, mind you, this individual was somebody that, you know, I loved and liked their company. It was just this persistent kind of behavior that was a little annoying. And I said, when I got into the room and saw that it was them sitting there, I was like, okay, I sat there and I just looked. And I looked at both of them, and I'm like, okay, in other words, without saying like, how can I help you? So my roommate began to talk and explain, and then the person interjected and pretty much was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean," and it, really apologized and wanted to make me know that they did not mean to hurt my feelings and they don't want to destroy our friendship, et cetera, et cetera. All of that went on. And I remember sitting back looking at that situation, and I said, wow. Now, I didn't learn this lesson in the moment. I want to put a clause there, because many people will try to say, sit down to a situation or right after an occurrence, and think you can just pull out because you have this prudent heart, if you will, you can just pull out lessons automatically. Sometimes they'll come later. And it was a little later. Now, mind you, I accepted the apology and moved forward and all of that kind of stuff. And we was good from that point out. But it was later on that I learned a lesson from that situation. And one of the things I learned was compassion. And I say compassion because I realized in that situation that sometimes we take offense to things, and rightfully so. You know what I mean? Because if somebody spits in your face, I should be offended. You know what I mean? Because you are directly attacking me. But sometimes we don't understand how compassion needs to be implemented in order to resolve or repair relationship. And I was convinced in my mind, I said my piece, I was done, I'm good. But the compassion wasn't there, because I didn't want to have anything else to do with you. I was done with that situation. And it wasn't until after the situation resolved that I realized that I had no compassion for that person in that moment. And how do you say you love and have compassion for people, and then you can just cross it off and just walk away? You if you have real compassion, you can't. However, you can use your emotions, you can use your ability to keep certain elements of a story, a narrative, or an occurrence in the forefront of your mind and in your heart that keeps that compassion suppressed. But true compassion, if you allow it, if you peel back the layers of the hurt or the disappointment, you'll find that it's still there. And that's what happened when we had that intervention. The compassion was revealed again. You get what I'm saying? I was able to peel back the layers of the sore or the wound and find that compassion again, find healing in the compassion. So I learned compassion, and I learned how to have compassion for people that sometimes do you wrong. And that's something that I think is challenging for us. Many of us have that issue. It's kind of strange to in the human mind to say I have love or compassion for you, and you did me, or you did me wrong. You're intentionally so. I'm not talking about people who accidentally, or I didn't mean it that way. I'm talking about you specifically set out to do this, and you did it, and I'm supposed to still find compassion. It's possible and necessary. So that's one thing I learned from that situation. The other thing I learned from that situation, I learned how to forgive, and the importance of forgiveness. Not necessarily how to forgive, because I was forgiving before, but I learned the importance of forgiving. And I say the importance because if I had not, first of all, if there hadn't been any intervention, I would not probably have, the relationship would not have been repaired. And not only would it not have been repaired, but I would not have had the opportunity to allow forgiveness to flow from my heart to that individual. And it was important that I learned that lesson, because when you're holding unforgiveness, there's really this root of pain and agony that you're holding on to. You think you're moving on, and you're shielding yourself, and you're covering yourself from offense, and you're protecting your heart, but really you're holding on to the root of bitterness that was the result of that occurrence, that situation, that circumstance. And I didn't realize that until the relationship was repaired and I had forgave. because after I had forgave, this burden like lifted. I was lighter again. I didn't realize how heavy and how deeply seated I had become in unforgiveness, which ultimately showed up in this rigid type of personality, this rigid type of existence. Very, very cut and dry, very nonchalant, and just it wasn't until I forgave that I realized that I was bogged down with unforgiveness. And sometimes we don't see it as unforgiveness. Like I said, you see it as you're just protecting yourself. You're not going to put yourself in that situation again. And granted, just because you forgive doesn't mean you have to fall back into a continual relationship with that person. You know what I mean? Sometimes it just needs to be severed, but if you forgave, you're not going to have ill feelings. You're not going to be avoiding people. You're not going to be trying to make sure that that so-and-so ain't there if you being invited to an event or to dinner and who all gonna be there. You know what I mean? That kind of situation. You ever had those kind of people when you call and you invite them somewhere? Well, who all coming? Why is it necessary to know? Because you're trying to avoid so-and-so, or you want to make sure if so-and-so is there, you show up in a certain kind of light, whatever the case may be. But you start acting and responding in those kind of ways. And many times that is a result of you not having forgiveness. And sometimes it's insecurity and other things, but sometimes it is unforgiveness for whatever a person may have done, said, or whatever to you in the past. When you forgave truly, you won't walk around with that kind of burden on you. You can look that person in the face, wish them well, and go on about your business. You won't have to walk around trying to sneak around and cut corners and avoid. You got to, because you forgave. So I learned compassion and I learned forgiveness from that situation. And I'm so grateful that I learned it at that stage in my life because it changed the way that I deal with offense. I took the time to say, okay, I have to forgive. Now, whether I want to reconnect and resolve and repair the relationship is a whole nother situation. That's a whole nother conversation. So I'm not telling you that you have to jump back in relationship with people who were abusive to you. I'm not telling you that you have to maintain a relationship that is toxic and violent and unsafe for you. What I'm saying is you have to find that thread of forgiveness and find the lesson that you need to take away. And my lesson for that situation was compassion and forgiveness. That was my lesson. There's a lesson in the situation that you're in. There's a lesson in the circumstance that you're in right now. What is the lesson? What can you learn? How can you shift? How can you utilize your prudence? How can you shift your heart to a place of prudence so that you can obtain knowledge and ultimately grow and excel and fly above? That's what my girl Candy said. She said, fly above I fly above. You know what I mean? You fly above. It takes you, that lesson takes you and lifts you to another level of wisdom that you would not have had you not taken the time. Mind you, this is intentional work. This ain't something that you're going to just do haphazardly. This ain't something that's just going to occur just randomly. This is intentional work. You have to consciously put forth the effort to say, what can I learn from this? What's the lesson in this situation? I guarantee you, if you sit down, ask the question, and like I said, it may not come that day because you might still be burdened down with emotion, and that's fine. Don't cancel your emotion. I'm not telling you not to feel. I'm not telling you not to have thoughts, feelings about the situation or what happened to you or what they did, what they said, etc. I'm telling you that after you've gotten over your emotions, set them to the side for a moment and look consciously at that situation and say, what can I learn? That's the first opportunity that you can utilize. What can I learn? Proverbs 18:15 says that the heart of the prudent getteth knowledge. So from this moment forward, let your heart be prudent. Let your heart distinguish differently from situations that are meant to hurt you, that are meant to make you fall in pain and disappointment and disgust. Take a moment and see that situation from the perspective of a prudent heart, I guarantee you'll find the lesson that will lift you above the circumstance and above the offense, above the disappointment, above the discouragement, above the bad relationship, etc., etc. The next opportunity that we have in every situation. First, we started off with Proverbs 18 and 15. The next, we're going to talk about 1 Peter 4 and 8. 1 Peter 4 and 8, above all things, have fervent charity among yourselves. And this is why. He says, for charity shall cover the multitude of sins. I'll say that again, 1 Peter 4 and 8. He says, above all things, have fervent charity. And here's why he said it. He said, because charity shall cover the multitude of sins. What is charity? Well, now we have to take our time with this, because charity simply is love. But it's just not love in the sense that you think just regular, oh, I love her, I love him. No, charity is love that is distinguished by the fatherly love of God for humankind. It's distinguished by as the fatherly love that God has for his creation, humankind. In that it means it's the highest form of love, which we call agape love, which is sacrificial, unconditional, and persistent, no matter the circumstance. So I'm going to read that scripture again. Above all things, have fervent love among yourselves, for love covers or shall cover the multitude of sins. I'll say it again. Above all things, have agape love, the God kind of love among yourself, for the God kind of love shall cover the multitude of sins. When we talk about fervent, it says above all things have fervent love. What is that fervent? Without ceasing. That's what fervent means, without ceasing. What a tall task. What a tall task. What big shoes to fill. You're telling me, regardless of the circumstance, regardless of the situation, to have a love, a God kind of love, though, a sacrificial, unconditional, persistent, no matter the circumstance, kind of love without ceasing for all the men and women in my life, no matter what's going on. That's a tall task. That's a tall task. Not only does it say have fervent love, but here's why. It says because it will cover a multitude. And that word multitude just means a lot, a load, a whole lot. Cover a multitude of sin. And that sin simply it means offense. So what does it say in layman's term? Above all things, have love for yourselves and your brothers and sisters. For that love will cover the offense that occurs in those relationships. The love will cover the offense. When we find love, when you take a situation that may not feel good, that may not look good, that may not be one that you want to say is lovable, when you take a situation and you try to find the thread of love, that fiber of love in the situation, ask yourself when you look at the situation, okay, where's the love in this? Where's the thread of love in this situation? Because I guarantee you, when you find the thread of love, you'll find God. And you might say, well, oh my God, well, how's God in this situation? It's abuse. It's all kind of things going on. How is love in this situation? Well, how about not look at the situation and look at yourself in the situation? Because sometimes it may not be love in the situation or what has happened to you, but the love might be for you and how you responded and how you behaved or how you handled. And you might see a thread of growth in yourself, which you can then fall in love with. I remember a story about a lady who had an abusive marriage, if you will. And I'm not sure if it was physical, emotional, mental, whatever the case, but it was an abusive relationship with her and her husband. And she endured it for years. They had children, and all of a sudden she just got over it and she was done, and she had to let the relationship go. the father, the husband, moved on and went on with his life, and she continued to do what she did as a parent in the home. And it came a time years later when that husband, or that ex-husband, excuse me, was in a situation where he was having health challenges, and that ex-wife, who experienced all the hurt, abuse, pain, was able to go to the bedside of that man and care for him, regardless of all the issues and things that he had put her through. Regardless of that. To me, that is God kind of love. That's that fervent God love that the scripture is talking about. Because many times we experience abuse and people do things to us intentionally. And when the tables turn and they need us, many people they'll feel for them. I feel for you, as people used to say. When Shaka Khan said it best, she said, "I feel for you," but they can't step into a space or a role to do certain things because they can't help but remember what happened or what they did. But when you have a God love, you can go to the bedside of your abusive ex-husband and show him love and care, just as if he never put a hand on you, just as if he never mentally, emotionally abused you. The only way you can do that is if God kind of love is exhibited, because in our humanness, it is impossible. With our human love and what we throw around, I love you, I love her, I love him, how we throw that around, many times that kind of love is very shallow, and we don't realize it until these kind of occurrences happen, these kind of circumstances come about. Then you realize how deep is your love. I think all these songs coming to me today. I think the Bee Gees said it best. How deep is your love? Well, the God kind of love that is talked about in this scripture is the deepest of deep. You can't get no deeper. It can't get no deeper. So that's my question to you. When your love is deep and you look for the thread of love, what was the love there in that situation? From my perspective, just hearing the story, it was the love for a person that she probably knew had trauma and issues that they could not deal with, and just retaliated and took it out on her through the years. And she probably knew that though that was his behavior, it wasn't his true character. But the trauma that had not been dealt with was causing him to rise in this way that was not true to who he was. And to drown himself in drink and rowdy, reckless behavior. Somewhere along the line, she found the love for him again in order to be able to serve him in that way. And you only find that kind of love when you allow the love of God to arise. Because in yourself, you'll be like, girl, I feel for him, but when that God kind of love arises, you'll want to run to the rescue, to serve. If there's nobody there, and that's what the situation was from what was explained to me by her, is there was nobody else there to be by his side. Nobody else. Out of all the family, all the people, there was nobody else there. And something in her heart said, I'm just gonna go. And she had to go because it was her assignment to show him. It might not have even been for her. It might have been for him. To recall all the things that he had put her through, and to know that even now she could come and serve him in a way that he was probably not deserving. What do you think he saw in that situation? He saw the God love. If he never knew At any other point in his life, he knew God was real in that moment because he's looking at this woman that he used to abuse, who's now serving him when nobody else will. That's when love covers. And I guarantee you, when you say to yourself out of every circumstance, where is God? All you need to say is, where is the love? Roberta Flack said that. Look, I'm naming everybody today. Roberta Flack said that, where is the love? And I guarantee you, if you ask yourself, you'll find it. I don't care how bad the situation is. I don't care how devastating the person was or the situation was. You'll find the love if you look for it. And that is the next opportunity that you have. You have an opportunity to learn, and you have an opportunity to love. Not only to love someone else, but to fall in love with who you are. Because I guarantee you, when that woman walked into that hospital room, she found out that she had grown in ways that she probably hadn't known. If she had been asked years prior, would you do this for this person if they needed you? She probably would have been like, well, maybe I probably, who knows what the response would have been, because sometimes we think we'll respond and do things in a certain way until the situation happens. But I guarantee you, she probably saw another level of herself that she was able to fall in love with, because she was able to serve someone who never served her. She was able to give to someone who only took and stripped from her dignity, her pride. Find the love in the situation. The question is, where is the love in this situation? Can I find a thread of love in this situation? And I guarantee you, if you do, it will give you an opportunity to grow in affection, compassion, and ultimately exhibit the God characteristic to those who need to see it. The next opportunity you have, we're talking about how to find opportunity in every situation. 3 questions you must ask yourself. The third question and final question is one of thanksgiving. 1 Thessalonians 5:18 says, in everything give thanks. Simply means be grateful. If I had to put it in layman terms, which I think that is pretty clear, but I'll say it in another way, in every situation, in every circumstance, be grateful. That's a challenging thing. But what I learned, and I learned this personally, is when you're grateful, it's very hard to be resentful. You can't be resentful and grateful at the same time. So when you've had these situations that were tough and hard to deal with, or people that were abusive and things of that nature, if you find a element of gratefulness, you'll find that the resentment begins to dissolve. And that is important, because people get in situations that they don't even ask for it. Granted, I know you didn't ask to be in that situation. You didn't ask to have this kind of hardship. But if you're not careful, you'll become resentful, and then ultimately become very hard, very, very callous, and you'll ultimately lock up the well of blessing that is supposed to flow in your life, because resentment is there. You'll look at everybody differently. You'll look at every situation differently. Your heart won't be open. The Bible talks about having a stony heart, a heart of flesh. It talks about the different elements of a heart. You'll have a heart of stone. So not only will it show up in your behavior, you'll be hard to deal with, hard to love, but the seeds, the deposits, the wealth of love and information and opportunity that could have been deposited won't. It'll just fall away. It's like throwing grass seeds on a rock. Ain't no place for it to take root, because that resentment has hardened your heart. And when you find gratefulness, when you find the opportunity for thanksgiving, it breaks away that stoniness. It breaks away that callous heart and puts you in a place where now the soil of your heart is enriched. And now the seeds that will be deposited can now have an opportunity to grow. Find gratefulness in every situation. I remember a situation where I experienced myself, where I had to care for my father, whom I love. And I didn't question it, did not want to do it. I was very adamant and very hands-on and intentional and was gonna do it regardless to what anybody said. But I remember being in that situation and how tough it was. Just having the wear and tear on my body, having to always be on alert, the stress of it, the phone ringing wee hours of the morning, having to get up and go to the hospital. It was the wear and tear that I was not ready for. And I remember being in the situation and saying to myself, tired, exhausted, having worked 14, 15 hours, going to the hospital 11 midnight, go lay down a few hours, get a call at 3 a.m., got to go back because he got to go to this, all of that. On being the only child available because of proximity to be able to be hands-on like that. I remember saying to myself, I'm honored to serve him in this way. I was grateful for the opportunity to serve him in that way. Was it easy? Not at all. But my gratefulness gave me the ability to push forward, even when I was tired, drained, strained, stressed. My gratefulness gave me the push that I needed, because I looked at it as a situation that I did not have to be privileged to have. And I was privileged to have it because I knew that I had the opportunity to show him the level of love that I have for him. It's one thing to just say, oh, you know, your kids love you and your family love you. But it's another thing when situations arise and they have to exhibit the level of love that they have. And the level of love had me getting up wee hours of the morning, meeting him at the ER, getting up wee hours of the night, going to check on him because the call came through, getting up in the wee hours of the morning just because he called and wanted to know where I was. All of that gave me the opportunity to serve in a way that I did not know I could. But I knew in the situation, I was grateful for the opportunity. Did I want it to happen? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Did I necessarily want to be the only child of his in proximity that was able to get up and go and run and be available because I was just the one that was nearest? Not necessarily. Not at all. Not at all. But I said, you know what? This is my opportunity to serve him. And at the end of his life, I had an experience with him that my other siblings had not. Why I was able to get that chance, I don't know. I haven't discovered that. But I do know that I was grateful for the opportunity. That when he left this earth, he left knowing, I don't know about everybody else, but he left knowing that I cared for him. He left knowing that I had a love for him that he did not have to question. I was grateful for that. So there are situations that will arise in your life. There are things that will happen, circumstances sometimes that will come about because of things that you've done or not done. Sometimes it'll come about because of things that people do in your life, and et cetera, et cetera. Some of the situations you may ask for because of actions and things that you've done. Some of them you may not have asked for. Whatever the circumstance, whatever the situation, there is a way to find an opportunity. And the opportunity is that you can level up no matter what situation you're in. I'm talking about leveling up emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You can level up. This situation can bring wisdom into your life that you never would have had otherwise. This situation could render a character that you never would have developed otherwise. But it won't do it if you look at it through the lens of discouragement and why me? Oh, I don't understand. There is an opportunity here. Take time within yourself to ask these 3 questions. And you might not be able to ask all 3. Let me put that out there. Some situations you might can only pick one of the 3 and say, okay, well, let me try this one. Because sometimes you might not love nothing about the situation, but you might have something that you can be grateful for. Sometimes you can't find anything that you can be grateful for, but you can say, okay, I learned not to do this again. Or I learned that if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to do this and this and that. You get what I'm saying? So ask yourself one of the three questions. Don't overwhelm yourself. Ask yourself one of the three questions as it pertains to whatever situation that you're in, and find out what your answer is and make that applicable to your life and use it to build wisdom and character for yourself. Ask yourself, what can I learn from the situation? Ask yourself, what love can I find, or what can I love about this situation, or where's the thread of love in this situation, or where is God, if you want to call it that, in this situation? Thirdly, you want to ask yourself, what am I grateful for about this situation? What am I thankful for when it comes to this situation? And I guarantee you, if you allow one of those three questions to speak to your heart and show you the answer, you'll find an opportunity in life that you never would have gotten otherwise. This has been the Build on Beauty podcast, where beauty is born skin deep. I'm your host, Cornell Jermaine. Until next time, let your soul be made whole. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Build on Beauty podcast. For more information about our host, please visit cornelljermaine.com.